Okay, welcome back, everyone. It's 1:30, so we will continue to our last section with speakers. This section will include Congressman Mike Simpson, representative from NEI, but CEO herself, Maria Korsnick, and John Wagner of INL. I will first introduce Congressman Simpson, and we'll proceed. Congressman Mike Simpson is in his 11th term in the House of Representatives, representing Idaho's 2nd Congressional District. He serves on the House Appropriations Committee and is currently the ranking member for the Subcommittee on Energy and Water Development, a key committee for this project. He also serves on the Interior and Environment Subcommittee. Simpson is one of the House's leading advocates for a new energy policy and a renewed commitment to research and development on improved nuclear technologies. Of particular interest to UAMPS, Simpson's political career began in 1980 when he was elected to the Blackfoot City Council. So we are very grateful. I can't reiterate our thanks enough, Congressman, for you joining us, providing perspective on the appropriations process and everything that you've done regarding this project to keep it on track. So with that, I will turn it over to you, and thanks so much for taking the time.
You bet. Thank you for inviting me to participate in this panel and talk about what's going on in the appropriations process. It's an unusual year, not just for America and with the COVID virus and everything else that's going on, but it's an unusual year for the appropriations process too. And in fact, last week, the last 2 weeks, Congress was out, but the Appropriations Committee was in session for the entire 2 weeks, marking up first in subcommittee all 12 of our appropriation bills, and then in full committee all last week we marked up all of the appropriation bills. Where it's going from here is anybody's guess. We're going to do apparently 2 packages of appropriation bills, one this coming week, which will include interior and agriculture, state and foreign ops, and I think military construction. And then next week, we're going to take the other 8 bills, 7 of them, including energy and water, will be in a package next week. So by the end of next week, by the time we start our August recess, we should have all of the appropriation bills past the House. What's going to happen in the Senate, I'm not sure. I understand secondhand that they are starting their markup process with their bills. They just need to get something marked up, frankly, so that we can go to conference. And then in September, throughout August and September, we can conference with the Senate on the various bills. The energy and water bill that I'm the ranking member of and was the former chairman of that subcommittee obviously is very important to me. I was disappointed in this year's bill in that the only account that was actually marked down from last year was the nuclear energy account. And it was like $56 million, something like that, if I remember correctly, that it was down from last year. And if you really care about carbon-free energy and so forth, that's an account that needs to be plussed up. But I will tell you what I think is going on, and I think that because I used to do the same thing when I was chairman of the committee. I would look at it and say, okay, what is the Senate going to be prioritizing on? What are Lamar Alexander and Dianne Feinstein's priorities? Those things that we knew that they would have plussed up in their markup, I would actually mark them down in our accounts so that we could put money in other things that were our priorities. And then when we got into conference, we knew that there was going to be a compromise between the two. And I think the same thing is happening here, that Marcy Kaptur, the chairwoman of the committee, knows that nuclear energy is important not just to me, but to Lamar Alexander also. And I think when we get in conference, we will have a good chance of getting that account marked up. At least I'm very hopeful. That's what I'll be fighting for. But it's one of the concerns I had in the current bill. I know that with the SMRs, there was a plus up of, I think, $5 million, went from $100 million last year to $105 million this year. And I know that UAMPS needed something like $165 million or requested that in their budget request. And I'm hopeful that we will get up close to that. one of the problems that we have, but we won't know that until September when we get these bills conferenced. And our intent is not to do a CR. But I got to tell you, in all honesty, if we end up doing a CR, continuing resolution for a year, nuclear energy comes out of that ahead. They'll be back up the $56 million that they were cut down in this year's budget. They'd be back to last year's level, which would be better than what the House mark was. So, it's kind of 6 to 1, half dozen to the other. And we may end up in a 1-year CR or at least a CR until the first of the year. If we can't get these bills conferenced. One of the problems that we had in this markup is the Democrats decided that they would, let me put it this way. We had a budget agreement last year that gave us the amount of money, what's called the 302A, that could be spent both last year and for this year. And that gave us our marching orders to start with about how much money there was going to be available in the various appropriation bills. And we also had an agreement with the Democrats that there would be no poison pills added as riders to these appropriation bills. Well, that agreement went all to heck this year, because what they did is they marked up the bills to the budget agreement, but then they added on in almost all of the bills emergency spending, totaling some $250 billion of additional spending that they wanted to do in a variety of areas. Now, some of these things that they added on, I could support, but they should not be a part of the appropriation bill. They should be in an emergency appropriation bill that's separate from these. And so that's why almost all Republicans, in fact, I think all Republicans, voted against all of the appropriation bills that were marked up last week, because we didn't like the additional spending that they had put into these bills without any notification to us, without any consultation with us or anything else. They just added all these bills, and what they're trying to do is, they passed the House passed what was called the HEROES Act, $3 trillion bill to address the COVID virus issue. The next thing they wanted to do, Nancy told their members when they were drafting it, they never consulted with Republicans, but she told their members to go big. Don't think small, think big on this. So ultimately, it ended up with $3 trillion price tag. And there were a lot of things in it that were just crazy, that didn't have anything to do with COVID-19 or anything else. It was just a way to spend $3 trillion. So Republicans voted against that, and the Senate would never take it up. And Mitch McConnell is not taking it up. But they are trying to put a lot of those provisions in the regular appropriation bills, thinking that they could get them that way. But if they stick to their horses on that, these appropriation bills won't pass, and we'll be headed for a CR for next year. The Senate is currently working on a Republican response for a fourth COVID bill, but there you've got, as I listened to Mitch McConnell yesterday with the president, they're focusing on a very narrow set of issues that they want to deal with, but they've got to get Democratic support too. So they're going to have to work with them and try to get the Democrats in the Senate to go along with them. And how much that will expand beyond just the COVID-19 stuff is hard to say yet. But we'll see what comes out of the Senate and whether the House can take it up or not. But that's where we stand with the appropriation process. It's kind of a mess this year, but we're trying our best to get the appropriation bills done. We won't know yet what the final outcome of these is going to be until probably late September. But my goal in life is to actually get the appropriation bills, all 12 of them, done before October 1st, at least one time while I'm in Congress. It hasn't happened yet, but it would certainly be nice to do. So anyway, that's an update on what's going on with the appropriation process. I want to hear from you guys about your needs and what you think we ought to be doing.
Thank you, Congressman. And if you could just also take a second to maybe just address the level of support across. We're seeing increasing support in both the House and the Senate for the energy and water bill and SMR funding in particular. If you have maybe a comment you could share about that and maybe your perspective on how that support has changed for the issue of nuclear.
Well, it's, and I brought it up in the hearing that if they've got a lot of money in there for renewable energies and other types of energies that are carbon free and so forth, and they mention in our appropriation bill, they talk about climate change several times and the need to do X, Y, and Z and that kind of stuff. So it surprised me when they marked down the nuclear energy portion of it, because if you're ever going to have a base load support for a carbon-free form of energy, it's nuclear energy. More and more people are coming to that realization. As I said, I think it's a strategy that they're doing by marking down the nuclear energy part of this bill in order to negotiate with the Senate, and I'm hopeful that we will get that number back up to where it ought to be. But you're seeing increasing support, not just in Congress, but across the nation for nuclear energy. And if you cannot be serious about addressing climate change without addressing nuclear energy also. And I think you're seeing more and more support, as I said, both in Congress and across the country. The challenge we have still is finding a permanent repository for nuclear waste. And they did not put any money in there for Yucca Mountain. They put money in for what they call consent-based interim storage. The problem with that is if the federal government is not working on a permanent repository, what community is going to take interim storage when they look at that being the likelihood of long-term storage or permanent storage rather than just interim storage? But they put money in there for interim storage, and I'm not opposed to interim storage. What I'm opposed to is not working on Yucca Mountain and getting that funded. But the administration came out and, as you know, said that they support Nevada and wouldn't push for Yucca Mountain funding. I don't know if that's till just after the election or what, but ultimately we've got to resolve this problem, and that's one of the other things that I'm disappointed in our bill, and hopefully we will get that done. But I think you're seeing across the board increased support for nuclear energy.
Well, thank you so much again. I know you have a busy schedule, so we're very, very grateful to your time. And I understand, based off conversations with your staff, you may be able to stay or not. If we get other questions and you're around, we'd love to be able to ask you. But right now there are no questions, so we will move on to our next speaker as we discuss nuclear's role in the energy future for the United States, and that is NEI's president and CEO, Maria Korsnick. Korsnick, before coming to NEI, was a senior vice president of Northeast operations for Exelon, responsible for overseeing the operation of Calvert Cliffs 1 and 2, Regina, and 9 Mile Point 1 and 2 nuclear plants. Impressively, she has held a senior reactor operator license. And so she has a vast experience, both the policy and the practical hands-on experience of the nuclear industry. And again, Congressman, thank you so much for your time.
You bet. I'll stay here as long as I can.
I will kick it over to you, Maria. Thank you so much again.
Great. And great to see you, Congressman. Appreciated your remarks. Good afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity to participate in this discussion. It's really great to be with you today. All of us share a stake in the success of the carbon-free power project. And it's not just those of us taking part in today's discussion. The work that UAMPS is doing right now could not be more consequential. The carbon-free power project holds such promise for your customers and the communities in which you operate. And it's critical to the nation, to the world, and quite frankly, to the planet. I've always been passionate about the potential of nuclear power, and I'm grateful to have seen it from every angle throughout my career, from the control room of a plant, from inside innovative companies who make better technology year by year, and from the heart of the communities that nuclear strengthens with its clean energy and its jobs. Now, as the president and CEO of NEI, I have the privilege of advocating for nuclear, shaping policies that best position our industry for the future. As As the voice of the nation's nuclear energy industry, NEI is working with our members and with Congress to develop technology-neutral clean energy policies that will incentivize new nuclear alongside other carbon-free technologies and that will help insulate first movers from the financial challenges associated with deploying new carbon-free technologies. The story of nuclear technology, like the story being written today by the Carbon Free Power Project, is a story of American ingenuity. Throughout the 20th century, the ingenuity behind our technology created the world's foremost commercial nuclear industry and enhanced U.S. national security.
Maria,
Today,
I'm so sorry to interrupt you. There's been some feedback issues regarding you're breaking up a little. I don't know if there's something on your end, but I just if there's.
I can hear you fine, but you can't hear me okay?
Well, it's just a little broken up, Maria. This is Doug Hunter. I think you just continue on. I've been able to follow what you're doing. I think most people can. We just clarify. It's just a little broken up.
Just turn that off. And maybe turn the volume up here. Maybe the volume would help.
Yeah, I've been able to follow your comments just fine. It's just a little, like a couple of little blips every once in a while.
Okay.
Sorry. Well, typical internet. It's like watching Netflix and it sort of stalls for a second,
Okay. All right. I'm just gonna. I'm not sure if you can tell me if it's any better at all.
Oh, it's about the same, but that's okay. I would just continue on. I think you were just on the thing. I won't worry about it.
All right, thanks. Well, today the U.S. nuclear fleet is the largest source of safe, carbon-free energy anywhere in the world. It provides a fifth of the country's electricity and over half of our carbon-free electricity. And that's more than every other carbon-free source combined. The world is making the essential decision to decarbonize, and as it does, nuclear is a key that will unlock solutions to some of the most challenging, consequential challenges that we face. The ingenuity of the nuclear industry can help us meet the world's growing demand for energy while decreasing emissions. We can harness the power of technological breakthroughs to raise living standards across the country and around the world. We can supercharge innovations at home and advance U.S. leadership abroad. Most importantly, as you know, together we can address one of the greatest challenges of our time, the changing climate. For a long time, we saw this challenge and asked how, as in, how do we stop it? And how, at the very least, do we slow it? Projections show that we need to dramatically reduce carbon emissions by 2050 to avoid the worst effects, such as the increased frequency and intensity of wildfires and droughts that can disrupt river flows and farmland in the communities that you serve. Simply using less energy isn't really a solution. We need to reduce emissions while simultaneously meeting growing demand. That might sound intimidating, but we know how to do it. Studies have shown that every viable path to a reliable, affordable, decarbonized electricity system needs to include nuclear, wind, and solar. And it requires every source of carbon-free energy working together. Nuclear power, the world's most reliable and scalable carbon-free energy source, must be at the center of that mix. And that's because no other emissions-free source of energy comes close to matching nuclear's around-the-clock reliability. In 2019, the U.S. fleet operated at a capacity factor of 93.4% to provide that reliability. It's our highest ever. And as we look ahead, our choice is not between nuclear or wind and solar. It's a choice that must include nuclear and wind and solar, or continued emissions that put lives and security at risk. It's a choice between a status quo with rising emissions or a low carbon future with all available sources. Study after study makes this choice really very clear. One recent study examined different routes that the Pacific Northwest could take to achieve a carbon-free future, and it found that the region needs nuclear to maintain a consistent supply of power as it decarbonizes. And that's because having a 24/7 carbon-free resource like nuclear avoids the need to overbuild wind and overbuild solar and overbuild storage, really a capacity that will remain unused for much of the year. So the bottom line is that any clean energy system without nuclear would be much more expensive. The world is counting on all the carbon-free sources to complement one another. Utilities across the US and abroad are in the midst of a major transformation. They've announced bold carbon reduction goals and are actively trying to determine how to meet those targets. And simultaneously, they realize that the need to produce enough energy to replace carbon emitting sources like coal and meet the rising consumer energy demand. UAMPS Carbon-Free Power Project is helping us map the way forward, and I'm so grateful for it. This project recognizes the promise of the next generation of nuclear to meet energy demand while reducing emissions. And as you know, UAMPS is well on its way to bringing the first ever small modular reactor online, and it's hard to overestimate the value of a project like it. You're really pioneering a key piece the next generation technology that will prove that nuclear can be both a carbon-free and a cost-efficient option. And you have a great teammate in the Idaho National Lab to get you there. INL is our nation's leading expert in how nuclear and renewables integrate and complement one another. The steps that you're taking now will save you money in the future and will save communities and our country so much more than that. These new designs will bring reliable carbon-free electricity to even more people, including in hard-to-reach places where existing technologies really don't make sense. We are well on our way to realizing the potential of this next generation. Projects like UAMPS will prove nuclear's key role in an energy mix that includes wind, solar, and batteries. Ultimately, it will show how the next generation of nuclear can help meet consumer needs at a lower cost. To meet a diverse set of market and customer needs, we have to push forward on new nuclear designs, and we'll need all hands on deck. And the good news is that we have already seen strong federal and private sector investment in research and development. The US industry has spent billions of dollars to develop advanced reactors, and these technologies are rapidly maturing. And those include commercial microreactors that could power small remote areas, and others that can provide heat for industrial processes or generate hydrogen, for example. We're seeing real market interest in that next generation of nuclear. Utilities across the country are exploring the potential of small modular reactors as part of their strategy to achieve their carbon reduction goals. And as you know, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission is expected later this year to approve the first ever technical review of an advanced reactor design, which will be for NuScale's small modular reactor. And last December, Tennessee Valley Authority received an early site permit for a small modular reactor at the Clinch River site, the first such approval in the United States. And in March, Oklo submitted the first microreactor license application to the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. The Department of Defense is even pursuing a deployable microreactor that could power military units in the field and military installations right here at home. We expect the first advanced reactor demonstrations to begin in just a couple of years, and expect that a number of commercial advanced reactors will be online by the end of this decade. When it comes to federal support, continued investment in advanced nuclear research and development is critical. At NEI, we advocate on behalf of the nation's nuclear industry to ensure policymakers understand the need to accelerate nuclear innovation and help bring these new technologies to market. At the end of 2019, lawmakers approved appropriations for the fiscal year 2020 that include $1.5 billion for nuclear energy programs. That's a 12.5% increase from the previous year, and the most funding for nuclear in decades. The U.S. Department of Energy and our outstanding national labs, as my co-panelist John Wagner can tell you, they've played a key role in helping companies accelerate the development of advanced reactors through R&D support and cost share programs. The DOE recently issued a funding opportunity announcement that will support the demonstration of 2 advanced reactor designs within 5 to 7 years. And that would help fund also risk reduction work for several more new designs. Building technologies like this, which until recently existed only as designs on paper, represents a major tipping point for the next generation of nuclear. And it also represents opportunities for the NRC to modernize its regulatory process. It can efficiently license advanced reactors in a way that ensures nuclear can play its part in a carbon-free future. We recognize that we must maintain the highest levels of safety that our industry is known for, while also grasping the opportunity to improve the regulatory process to match the realities of new nuclear designs like SMRs. And that's why we're continuing to work with our members to understand the best practices for building new reactors, like the UAMPS project, so that they are built on time and on budget. Incorporating lessons learned in each subsequent build will help the NRC to adopt processes that best fit these new technologies. By learning and then eliminating unnecessary barriers or reducing licensing timelines, we can help dramatically reduce the cost of new nuclear. And we're already seeing progress. The Commission has approved a proposed rule that would allow advanced reactors to establish emergency planning zones that are more appropriate for these designs. So before we take your questions, I just want to remind you that you're not alone in this. The consensus is that we are heading to a carbon-free future. The decision has been made and the path ahead is clear. I commend UAMPS for anticipating what your customers will need, what our communities will need, what our country will need, and what kind of energy mix our decarbonization policies will require. You're now among the pioneers on our journey to a reliable carbon-free future, and I'm so very grateful for that. We know that nuclear is key to getting there, to reducing emissions while meeting the rising energy needs of our consumers. And it's my hope and my firm belief that when we reach 2050, nuclear power will be part of the foundation of a carbon-free energy system. And all of us here will know that we made it a reality together. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. Do you have a question that came in regarding the carbon emissions associated with energy sources like nuclear energy? The question reads, should the words carbon-free be replaced with low carbon? What is the carbon impact from mining and refining the fuels? Have there been any studies done to show carbon contribution of nuclear or other sources of power? And your thoughts on that? Thank you.
Yes, great. Thanks for the question. I think what you're asking is the life cycle carbon footprint of the different technologies. And there have been studies that have done that. They've looked at the life cycle of wind and solar and nuclear, as well as others. And in those studies that have been done, nuclear in its entire life cycle, it's still the lowest from a carbon footprint perspective. I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, but you can imagine in manufacturing some of the solar panels and manufacturing some of the pieces and parts for wind and solar, all is some contribution from a carbon perspective as well. So you really have to look, if you will, at the whole life cycle, and nuclear continues to be very, very strong. To your point about saying, well, is it really zero carbon or is it no carbon? And part of it, I would just say we have to speak the same language. And since in general, people refer to an energy source by, what it emits as it's producing that energy, that's where we go with zero carbon. But not trying to hide anything. Again, we can look at the whole life cycle across the board. I hope that helps answer your question.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that response. And I feel bad because you had perfectly introduced Dr. Wagner, and now I had to interrupt that brilliant introduction. So thank you again, Maria, and for all that you guys are doing at NEI. The partnership's phenomenal with you guys, as well as INL, the Idaho National Lab, where our last speaker works. Dr. Wagner is the Associate Laboratory Director at INL's Nuclear Science and Technology Directorate. Dr. Wagner initially joined INL as the Chief Scientist at MFC in 2016. He has more than 20 years of experience performing research and managing R&D projects, programs, and organizations. He is also a fellow of the American Nuclear Society and has authored or co-authored more than 170 referred journal and conference, revered journal or conference articles, technical reports, and conference summaries. Thank you, Dr. Wagner.
Thank you, Mike. Thanks for that introduction. Can you hear me okay? I'm going to assume that's a yes.
Yes, we can hear you just fine. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that from Doug.
Yeah, you're fine. We can hear you just fine, John.
Excellent. Thanks, Doug. Again, thanks for that introduction. I want to thank Doug and the whole UAMPS team for including me on this agenda. I have the honor, or maybe dubiously so, to be the last speaker. Last I saw, there were still almost 130 individuals still participating, so appreciate everybody's endurance on hanging in there. I'd also like to thank Maria. Those were excellent remarks, Maria. Really appreciate those, and I'll try to not be redundant, but I will build on some of the remarks that she made. NEI is a fantastic partner for us, and I appreciate that. Then, not to go to a long list, but I also have to thank Congressman Simpson for his steadfast support for nuclear energy, for the Idaho National Laboratory, and his continued support for nuclear waste disposal solutions. So thank you for your leadership on that, Congressman. So I'm going to have a fairly short remarks about covering the role of nuclear energy in the future, which Maria spoke quite a bit to. So I'll just amplify a few parts of that. And then INL's role. INL is a Department of Energy national laboratory. We're one of 17 national laboratories across the country. Each national laboratory has a focus, and ours is nuclear energy. We do other things, but our primary mission, primary focus is nuclear energy. And I'll talk a little bit about our origins and what we're doing today. So if I could have the next slide, please. I wanted to start with a little bit of context. I know climate change is a controversial subject, but so I won't get into that, but I'll just get into the basic facts. When you look at multiple studies showing projected increases in world energy use, around the predictions are around 28 to 30% by 2040. This energy has to come from somewhere. We have decisions to make with respect to what the source of that energy is. Is it carbon emitting? Is it not carbon emitting? And I think, as Maria has already covered, the world has spoken in terms of their preference. And so the leadership of UAMPS in this project, the word pioneer she used is absolutely correct word. The other thing is there's multiple studies in terms of the rise in temperature of the planet. Currently, projections are the atmospheric temperature will increase by 2.7 degrees Celsius by 2040 if we continue at our current greenhouse emissions. And so these are just facts that are pretty much indisputable. And I know everything can be disputed, but pretty much indisputable by multiple studies. The fastest and most appropriate technology to put a dent into this carbon emissions is nuclear energy, in combination with other sources as well. It's not just nuclear energy; it's the role that nuclear energy needs to play in the time frame needed to reduce our carbon emissions going forward to support the energy demands of the world. If I could have the next slide, please. And so currently there are 10% of the world's electricity comes from 450 reactors around the world. Looking at these multiple studies suggesting what is needed in terms of carbon reduction, the consensus is we need to be about at least 25% nuclear by 2050 to reach carbon emissions goals. And that represents a tripling of nuclear energy over what 2050 may seem like a long time from now, but it's really not that long time to triple the world's nuclear electricity generation. If I could have the next slide, please. Maria covered some of these. I'll point to the pie chart on the right hand of your screen. Nearly 60% of the clean energy in the U.S., clean electricity, is coming from nuclear. Maria also referred to the record capacity factor of nuclear plants last year. But I'll note that since 1999, the capacity factor has been over 90%. So that's consistency over almost 20 years in terms of the consistent electricity generation coming from our nuclear plants. John Hopkins and others mentioned jobs. So on this slide, there's some numbers with respect to the amount of jobs that nuclear energy supports. And of course, in the top left, you see a number of very important factors with respect to the lack of carbon emitted because of the nuclear energy in this country. I won't go into further because I think Maria covered some of these points very well. If I could go to the next slide. With this slide, I'd like to point out all of the organizations that are supporting nuclear energy and note that many of these organizations, even a few years ago, were opposed to nuclear energy. But as they've looked at these various studies, the need for clean energy, the effects on our environment, many of them have changed their views and have gone from opponents of nuclear energy, nuclear electricity, to proponents of nuclear energy. I think this is incredibly telling, and we're seeing an example of the very large shift we're seeing in attitudes towards nuclear energy. And again, UAMPS had already made their decision to move forward with it. Well, of course, it's moving forward, but had made their decision to pursue this carbon-free power project many years ago. Again, an example of foresight and a pioneering view. Next slide, please. I mentioned INL is focused on nuclear energy. I'm going to spend the last few slides with you talking about the Idaho National Laboratory. And I'm going to start with where we came from. The site that INL is now on was originally something called the National Reactor Testing Station. It was established in 1949. And over that time period, many nuclear firsts occurred on this site that now in the future will hold the first NuScale reactor as part of the carbon-free power project. This site, this area that is now the Idaho National Laboratory, drove innovation, really created nuclear energy and the safety basis of all the nuclear energy that is now used throughout the world. Many firsts, as I mentioned, first nuclear power plant to power a city, that was Arco, Idaho. First submarine reactor tested, and then many thousands of operators trained on this site over the years to support our U.S. nuclear Navy. First nuclear power plant, mobile nuclear power plant for the Army, which is quite interesting. And as Maria just mentioned, the Department of Defense Strategic Capabilities Office is now pursuing mobile nuclear power plant again, which is kind of interesting that many decades later, the value of this in terms of supporting their mission has been identified. And we currently have a project that we are working on with the Department of Defense to demonstrate their what will be the next mobile nuclear power plant by 2024. And I'll talk a little bit about the timeline that we're looking at for some of these nuclear projects. Nuclear waste is often a topic. The actual demonstration of a closed nuclear fuel cycle, so meaning taking the spent fuel out of the reactor, processing it and putting it back into the reactor and using it, was demonstrated in the Experimental Breeder Reactor 2, or EBR2. Significant safety tests, for one example, with the EBR2, demonstrating the walk-away safe aspects of that particular reactor concept. Note there are many different reactor concepts out there. Over the years, 52 different reactors were demonstrated on the Idaho National Laboratory site, although I will say it's been decades since we've demonstrated a new reactor, and that's what our focus is now. Also, I want to note the majority of the reactors throughout the world are what we call light water reactors. The NuScale design is also a light water reactor, although an advanced light water reactor. The safety basis for those reactors around the world was largely developed at the Idaho National Laboratory. So it's incredibly fitting that NuScale would select Idaho National Laboratory as a site, UAMPS would select that site. And we are incredibly proud to be a partner for that. And it absolutely fits with our vision and with our mission of the laboratory. Next slide, please. So we talk a little bit about the site to give you some perspective. And also, as you can see right there in the middle, I put a star approximately where the preferred site, as I understand it, would be for the UAMPS carbon-free power project. So and let me step back a little bit and talk about the site. So it's 890 square miles. That was probably the thing that was most stunning when I first came out here to the Idaho National Laboratory. It's just the vastness of the site. That land mass rivals the size of Rhode Island, to give you some perspective. And not that we're a state, but we have a lot of infrastructure that you have to have for a site like this. And I'll start really with the first and most foremost infrastructure for such a lab with the mission that we have, and that is the nuclear facilities. The nuclear facilities, the radiological facilities, the operating reactors, the storage of the spent nuclear fuel from a number of those reactors, and are unrivaled anywhere in the country and in many cases anywhere in the world. It may not be known to many now that we currently have 4 operating reactors on our site. These are not power reactors. These are reactors focused on testing, supporting things like the naval research needs, the current civilian reactor needs, and so forth. And we have quite a few plans for additional reactors, again, that I'll refer to in a minute. But to support our mission, to support these infrastructure and so forth, we also have just basic infrastructure that's needed for a lot of these projects. We have rail access. We have 40 miles of primary roads that we maintain. We have 7 substations for power providers. We have 112 miles of transmission lines. And then we have additional services like fire support and, of course, security. Idaho National Laboratory is currently around 5,000 employees with an annual budget of about $1.35 billion. Next slide, please. Actually, sorry, hold back to that slide for a moment. I wanted to go back to just call out again where the UAMPS site would be located. It's north of where currently the Advanced Test Reactor is. For those of you who don't know what the Advanced Test Reactor is, it is the largest capacity, highest power research testing reactor in the country. And it supports both civilian nuclear needs as well as Navy is an important partner there. And then so it's north of there and a little west of the Naval Reactors facility. As Mike mentioned when he introduced me, I actually started at the Idaho National Laboratory at the Materials and Fuels Complex, which you can see is in this slide, is to the right or to the east of the Advanced Test Reactor. This is a facility that has very large hot cells, special nuclear materials, ability to do nuclear fuel fabrication, post-irradiation examination. So after you irradiate materials, you examine them, understand the performance in an irradiated environment, and so forth. A comprehensive set of capabilities to support advanced reactors and really advanced nuclear technologies generally. Our role at the Idaho National Laboratory is to innovate and demonstrate. Next slide, please. So I talked a lot about the past and where we are today. We lead research, development, and demonstration projects that sustain the current reactor fleet, which Maria talked a fair bit about, as well as these advanced nuclear energy systems that we're also talking about. Our primary goals then are to strengthen the domestic commercial nuclear energy enterprise. We work very closely with utilities, NEI, EPRI, those kinds of organizations, enable leadership in global nuclear energy markets. After the NuScale reactors are built by UAMPS on our site, we fully expect that they will be exported globally as they meet a lot of needs around the world in terms of their characteristics and also their power size. And then expand and deploy national nuclear energy strategic infrastructures. So these are the facilities that I referred to already. We have them. We have a number of facilities, but we also need additional facilities such as fast neutron spectrum testing capabilities in the versatile test reactor to support advanced reactor demonstrations and deployments. Next slide, please. With this slide, I'd like to provide some context of how the NuScale and UAMPS fit into our vision for advanced reactor demonstrations. So this is a timeline showing how we see advanced reactors being demonstrated over the next 10 years and beyond. Right now, there's a lot of interest in very, very small reactors. We call these microreactors. The Department of Defense, for example, is interested. Remote communities in areas like Alaska and Canada, remote mining and so forth. So it's very interesting that if you've been a student of nuclear energy for decades, these are not your grandfather's reactors, so to speak, which the trend had always been larger, larger, larger. In fact, we're seeing the trend go the other way. The small modular reactor class that NuScale represents is an example of that, where areas that don't need a gigawatt of electricity, it provides that option, and many other characteristics that John Hopkins already mentioned. And then there are other areas where even smaller is needed, and I mentioned a few of those, as well as federal interest in terms of the Department of Defense, as well as NASA that needs small fission systems for their mission. So we do anticipate some of these very, very small systems, again, we refer to them as microreactor systems, being demonstrated within the next few years. At the Idaho National Laboratory, we have a goal to demonstrate at least two by 2025. And these can be demonstrated on a different time scale, obviously, for a different sort of budget amount, and can be used as first movers to license non-light water reactor systems and work basically through some of the supply chain issues and so forth. So we see those in the early stages. We see the NuScale being the first commercially deployed reactor on our site, which will pave the way for small modular reactors throughout the world. We next see the versatile test reactor I mentioned too, providing critical needed fast neutron spectrum. I know many of you may not know what that means, but it's a different style of reactor, different characteristics that many are interested in for their attributes. And I can maybe do some discussion on that Q&A if there's needed. And we see all of these things, these pioneering NuScale reactor, the pioneering microreactors and versatile test reactor, enabling a broader future for nuclear energy that is absolutely needed across the globe, as I spoke about in my first remarks. Next slide, please. As I'm waiting for the next slide, my last slide is sort of a summary of and a culmination that has happened. It's been driven by all the interest and needs, bipartisan support for nuclear energy, primarily driven by clean energy needs. The National Reactor Innovation Center was established at the Idaho National Laboratory last August. It's a result of authorization of bill called NECA, the Nuclear Energy Innovation Capabilities Act, that was passed a little more than a year ago. And this kind of goes back to our roots. I mentioned Idaho National Laboratory started as a national reactor testing station. The National Reactor Innovation Center is the current generation of that, as we prepare now to demonstrate multiple reactors, to demonstrate proof of concept through proof of operation. And a lot of that too is to make sure to help people understand the attributes, the performance, and the characteristics of these reactors before they commit to a large project. And so we see this as a place that is driving innovation from both the private sector, federal agencies, and partnered with other national laboratories to enable that nuclear energy deployment that we need in the future to meet that clean energy need that we need in the future, again, in partnership with other renewable energy sources such as wind and solar. So I'll close with saying I'm thrilled to have the UAMPS NuScale project to be cited on our laboratory. It fits completely with our mission, and we're anxious to support it in any way that is necessary to make it successful. So thanks for the opportunity to make some remarks.
Great, thank you so much, John, for that. And I'm not seeing any questions right now, so I think that will just conclude our last segment and panel, and I will turn the time over to Doug Hunter.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Congressman Simpson, too. Since you're still on, I could say hi, how you doing? It's back there in D.C. doing the good work for everybody back there. It's a tough task you guys have. I think I haven't been to DC for 90 days. So
Well, it's one of those jobs that requires that you be here. Unfortunately, I'd much rather be in Idaho.
I don't blame you. I did. If I wasn't in Utah, I'd want to be in Idaho. Yeah. Well, so I'm going to do the wrap up here and so we're going to get to some questions, but let me just sort of recap from my perspective here. Hopefully you've all been able to see an understanding of the process that we've been undertaking. I like to tell people that we're not trying to do this quickly. We're trying to do this correctly. And there's a lot of lessons for us to learn from out there. In a way, it's been a blessing to have Vogel and VC Summer in front of us so that we could see what went on there and how maybe they got a little in front of their skis, if you will, a little bit on that and had to come back. But it's also very rewarding to watch Vogel come to completion without a big rate impact on anybody. I think that's another story to be told there. We've worked very closely with Municipal Energy Agency of Georgia, MEAG, who's the public power entity there, to learn the lessons they've done and the mistakes they made as you go through. So the process, it's delayed our commercial operation date, but again, it's very important that we do this correctly and not quickly. The other thing I think hopefully everybody perceived out of this is we've put together a structure to manage the known risks and the unknown risks in a way so that we can catch these ahead of time, mitigate them. And I'd like to add to that this concept of a team approach that we've had with everybody. Alan Breckman and John Hopkins, I think, exemplified that. We've got our consulting engineers and people run that. We're working in a very collaborative manner to address all the concerns and all the risks that come up so that we can then portray them to you, the participants. Because I think that's the next important thing. This process, as Mason pointed out, is a phased aspect that allows decision points to be reassessed and participants to leave if they wish or reduce their participation if they perceive other opportunities or higher risk. And that's what we're in right now. We're in what we refer to technically in the contract as the first phase of the licensing period. And we're looking at amending the budget, which the board tentatively allowed us to do last week, which all that did was allow us to get a notice out to the participants that there could be a change in the budget, which precipitates the participants' decision point, I think, which is a strength in this process. And really, the point that's being really proffered up to everybody is that there's really no decision to be made unless you want to withdraw from the project or reduce your entitlement share. If things feel comfortable and are still moving forward, you don't need to make a decision to move forward. That is, the status quo is already set. And I think that's really what I would personally recommend is that we just stay through this next phase out here. We're going to have at least 3 more meetings, at least, maybe 4. And we could have more than that, not counting the individual participant meetings. And let me just reiterate those really quickly. So we're going to be having 2 workshops associated with the nuances of subscription and how entitlement shares are increased, decreased, or totally withdrawn. There's some subtleties around that, how the contracts work. And we want to make sure that all the cities are on an even footing with each other, that no one is getting some type of, one up from somebody else, that everybody's on the same phase. We're going to have another project management committee meeting in August. There's going to be a number of items that we're going to be looking at that in there that will help clarify things. And then the final thing is the conditional approval of this budget plan of finance was contingent upon a number of things happening. And one of them would be the DOE cost award being completed in our hands and executed. if you will, so that we can see that. The second one would be the development cost reimbursement agreement between NuScale and UAMPS be fully executed. Our target date for that is the August board meeting. We're going to try and work towards that. I think that's achievable. And then the third one would be having what we call the Engineering Procurement Construction Development Agreement, EPCDA, if you will, executed as well. And there's a final one, to have the Project Management Committee set an internal budget for a period of time, so that they have we have goals setting and monitoring to see how this next process goes through here. As we're working towards de-risking this project in its early stages. I think the long-term benefits here, I think, are profound going through. We've got the ability to reduce our risk into a new technology. I understand it is. I agree with Bob Coward. This is it's not an easy project, but it's not a difficult project either. And the benefits that come out of this long-term deployment of this could be profound for our citizens out here. We would have, the communities would have reliable power in a uncertain future power market. We see the fact that we've got natural gas very low price right now, and that is driving energy prices down low. But as we've heard, concerns over climate change could put restrictions on the burning of that natural gas for power generation. And so that this would be a hedge that hopefully would not be any more expensive than picking natural gas. That was really the objective, is so that we could have a hedge against this uncertain future at a price that was competitive with today. So again, we've got, I'll just finish with this. Mason mentioned it, I'll mention it again. The staff is totally open for individual participant meetings. A number of them have been scheduled already. We can handle those. We've got other people coming in. We can bring in all sorts of this group of experts, again, in various forms, to answer very specific questions. We've had over 100 of these up to date on these things, and they're very helpful, I think, for the individual participants to be able to ask questions. I'd also offer this up. If you don't, you just contact UAMPS or your rep. I'm available, Mason's available, Mike, the whole staff of UAMPS, if you just want to ask direct questions to us as well. And then there's also your participants, your additional communities that are involved in this, and the consultants too. We can coordinate this thing around. So the concept is really to be able to answer questions, and so that you're informed. And whatever decision the communities make, we know you'll be making the right decision for your community. UAMPS is an open architecture, as Jason repeated earlier. We're project-based. We're not all power requirements. We don't require every participant to have the same portfolio mix or the same cost mix or whatever. And it's been a very successful platform in a lot of projects that we've got 16 that are running right now, and we hope that this will be an excellent. And with that, Mike, I guess if there's any questions that you've been sort of harboring over there on the Q&A, we can maybe open those up right now. We've got still a number of the participants, it looks like I can see, are still available. And why don't we just open those up if you've got any over there.
Right, there's a couple, and I would just ask for those speakers who have spoken today to just turn on your cameras so that people can, I guess, still ask you guys questions. That'd be helpful. The first, there are two. One relates to subscription, and the other specifically to power purchase agreement. The first is related to the responsibility of finding more subscriptions. Is it the responsibility of UAMPS or NuScale to find customers for the project?
Well, maybe I could start that off and just let anybody else contribute in there. I think it's responsibility of both of us. First of all, this is a UAMPS project, and so UAMPS needs to get subscription and has a desire to do it. A couple of points have been made, and I just want to reiterate those. One is that the concept of having NuScale have additional deployments besides the carbon-free power project is a profound benefit to us. So we have a study completed by the Tennessee Valley Authority that NuScale is vetted, as well as UAMPS, and Floor's seen it as well. And that basically, I refer to it euphemistically as the shared services concept. So unlike most of the fleet, nuclear fleet, that is all one-offs, if you will, Palo Verde, there's a couple that have a few, common generators or reactors. They're saying, but for the vast majority of the United States reactors, they're single deployments. And so the concept, as Maria comes from, you've had some of these big operators like Excel and that, or Exelon, that have a fleet management concept, but they're still different reactors. In this instance, we have the same cookie cutter reactor that comes out time after time after time. And the value of having that commonality could reduce our cost below the $55 based on our estimates right now by another $5 a megawatt hour. Significant savings on that. And so that's been an emphasis of UAMPS helping NuScale get additional customers. Let me just put a shout out to NuScale. NuScale has been with us in those over 100 meetings we've had with public power entities. They've been working with us hand in glove, trying to get additional participants. We do have a meeting next week with a number of potential participants. And we have asked those participants that have been ready. We did accept a new member in just last week or 2 weeks ago into the project. And we have others that want to come in, but I have specifically advised them to wait until we get past this budget amendment in our system to further their inquiries, given the fact that they would know more about it at that time. And so we do have a major meeting set. The participants are more than welcome to join in that virtual tour of the NuScale facilities, as we call it. You just get a hold of Jackie or Laura, and they'll get the registration in for you to go through. A lot of you have been up there already, and we'll be going through that process. So I think it's in terms of. I think we have been working together jointly out there. And I don't know if any other participants, John, Alan, or Mason would like to comment on that as well.
This is John, Doug. I just want to, again, we have tag teamed over the years together. We have our chief strategy officer, Chris Colbert, with you in numerous occasions with numerous members, and also not only within Idaho and other locations, but on the Hill as well, with Mason, yourself, myself, working both sides of the aisle, and the support we get and have gotten, as Congressman Simpson alluded to, he's been leading the effort for us in many ways, and we'll just continue to do. And a lot of this is about education, getting people comfortable with what we're all about.
Great, John. Yeah, I think it's been a very collaborative process. I understand the concept. We realize we started out collaboratively with the DOE award, where you needed a customer, a site, and a technology, and we've made a lot of progress towards that, and I think we will be at full subscription. The second question you had there, Mike, came up was on the PPAs to DOE. Mason, would you like to address that response to that question?
Sure. I think I've been discussing that with the Department of Energy, and I believe that they are going to fill the question from their perspective, and I can add on if necessary.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mason. My name is Melissa Bates. I know I wasn't introduced earlier. I work for Alice Caponini. I'm the small modular reactor program manager. And so I'm happy to have been able to participate in this meeting thus far today. In regards to the question that was asked in regards to DOE's role in providing support through a power purchase agreement, our perspective is that if the government's objective is to provide direct and efficient support for getting the carbon-free power project to commercial operation, that a cost-shared agreement is the most direct and efficient way of getting there. We may potentially pursue power purchase agreements at some point in the future. However, if we were to pursue a power purchase agreement at this point, we would not be able to provide payment for the carbon-free power project until at some point in the future when we would actually be acquiring a service. And so that wouldn't help as well with providing support into the project at this time. And so, like I mentioned, we may consider heading down the road of doing a power purchase agreement at some point in the future, especially if the nuclear energy, the acronym just escaped me, the NELA legislation, Nuclear Energy Leadership Act, if that gets passed, it provides DOE's ability to go from 10 years to 40 years under a power purchase agreement. And so that definitely opens some doors that can be considered at that time. However, given our current day objective is trying to get the carbon-free power project into commercial operation, we felt like a direct cooperative agreement was the best vehicle at this time. Mason, I don't know if you have anything you'd like to add.
No, I think that covers it. Mostly, we spent a lot of time looking at it with the DOE. So I think there's a lot of groundwork that's already been done. So we can pick it back up, the discussion on the power purchase agreement. We understand what the framework looks like. And, especially for servicing the INL, that's something that we could continue to pursue. And I know that Los Alamos County also supplies power to the Los Alamos National Lab. So that would be another way in which a PPA could get utilized coming out of this project. So there's a lot of work that has been done, and we certainly can pick back up that work and put it to use in the future.
Great. Were there other questions, Mike, that were in your queue, or?
I don't see others that.
The one thing did come up. So on slides and the availability of everything that went on today, this was recorded. If you would just contact your representative, that's how we're going to disseminate this session out here to each of the participants, so that they could replay it or put it out to others. And like I said, I think one of the best vehicles will be just to directly ask questions to us. We can go through and we'll have more meetings. I guess, in terms of just interest in time, I can see we're losing attendees rapidly here right now. They're dropping off as we're going. But things, I think I do have sort of to all the team players, if you had a brief maybe wrap up concept, it's really important. I think a number, specifically Alan Bregman with Floor and John Hopkins with NewScale and Alice with the Department of Energy all talked about a collaborative effort. And Bob accented it in terms of risk mitigation, how important it is in terms of risk mitigation. So I'd like to maybe wrap up with the concept of each of you just reiterating or stating how you see moving forward with this collaborative effort out there. And, John, I think since we've got the development cost and reimbursement agreement right up on the top of the thing there, maybe you could give us your thoughts on the collaborative process for risk management of the project.
Well, I think we've all mentioned, Doug, the importance of this project for numerous reasons, national security implications, as well as climate disruption. And, our ability collectively to work together to get this is, to me, very important for this country. And as, we hopefully, as the first project, are going to pave the way for other U.S. advanced reactors. As was mentioned by John and others, there's a next wave coming. They're further out. However, even with the advanced reactor community, it is a small community, and we all kind of support one another in what we're doing. So it's often been said, if NewScale and UAMPS are as far along as we are right now in this project, that if we can't get it over the goal line, how does the next advanced reactor get it over the goal line? So through our efforts, as we continue to work together and working with both sides of the aisle, continuing to try for us to bring additional U.S. investors, continue to secure the U.S. supply chain, which is what we're doing. All of that is going to hopefully promote and help advance this industry going forward. One thing I am seeing on the supply side, because the fabrication capacity in that, I think we need to see advanced manufacturing built out in this country. And it's going to happen. However, many of our suppliers we talk to, until they see an order book, they're not going to really tool up. So we've got to help work with them because, as I stated, throughout this presentation, there's a lot of jobs, high-paying jobs to be had here. We have a lot of communities, as I mentioned, that are phasing out fossil fuel plants, not so much because of politics. Economics don't support it. We have the ability to go in there and help these communities and replace and get people cross-trained into what we're doing. And these are all high-paying jobs. So normally when you think of a coal facility, 300-400 megawatts, you're talking in excess of 200 people. If you look at a new scale 720 megawatt plant, you're looking basically at about 300 people. So we just got to stay together with this and persevere.
Yeah, Doug, this is Alan. I'd like to add on to that comment. I think successful projects that I've seen during my career often rely on not just good planning and good organization. It relies on having really good people. And I think you've seen the presentations today and the companies that are working together. I hope everybody got and felt the cooperation and the collaboration that is going on with this project. I would like to make one other comment, and that is we talked a little bit about the viability of NuScale. What we didn't talk about is that NuScale and Fluor, and actually with a lot of assistance from UAMPS, is in fact talking to potential other customers. And we're very hopeful that within the next 12 to 18 months, we'll have at least one, if not two or three additional projects underway. And in fact, Fluor is betting on that in creating a new business line that will actually perform the work for that and continue to market it and develop capability around that.
Great. I don't know if anybody else had anything. If not, we've got a question coming in. We'll get a clarification. Maria, I'd have some follow-up for you if I could. One of the things I've always been intrigued with is the concept of when we went to regional markets in the East, PJM, MISO, New England, New York, power pools, and that it was always sort of the hot line that nuclear wasn't competitive in those markets, right, in the bid-in markets. Yet I look at their cost to operate, they're less than my coal plant. Some of these nuke plants are in the mid $30 a megawatt hour operating range, and my coal plants are consistently up in the $45 range. Is that, from your perspective, has that been the big concern, is just the bid-in markets that sit in the East as compared to fixed cost plants versus variable cost plants and renewables, or do you think that's going to change, or trends are going to stay the same?
Yeah, thanks, Doug. You're absolutely right relative to the cost. One of the things that we do is we look across the industry and we pull together and average the data. And when we looked at the average data for nuclear plant costs in 2019, it was 3 cents a kilowatt hour. And so you're very accurate in saying, that overall that's a low price. And yet even so with that low price, we have plants that are challenged in the marketplace. And part of that challenge is that it's really not, I'll just say, sort of a fair and open market. That sounds good, but there's just a lot of different sort of things that distort the market. There's different subsidies, whether that's at a state level or whether that's at a national level. And so one of the things that you've seen NEI be very engaged on, and we mentioned it before, is a clean energy policy or a clean energy standard that would be technology neutral. And so you're seeing that play out now in some of the states. Washington State, with Governor Inslee as an example, passed through legislation, a clean energy standard for the state of Washington. And then we did a study. E3 actually did the study for Energy Northwest and went and said, okay, how are we going to achieve that clean energy? And they looked at a lot of different scenarios, just renewables, lots of different things. And any scenario that didn't have nuclear in it was more expensive. And so go back to your sort of energy market scenario. I think what we really need is we need to take a hard look at these markets, and we need to see if, in fact, they want to rationalize carbon, if carbon is an important conversation, or clean, if that's something that the states are interested in. We got to introduce that concept into the marketplace. It's not well represented today. And so it shouldn't be a surprise to us. The market is not solving for the thing we're asking for because it's not built into the market dynamics. And so that's, again, that's some of the conversations that are playing out right now.
Yeah, thank you for that. We're out, in the West here, we're formulating our regulated market right now, and we've taken lessons learned associated with watching MISO and that as well, and trying to make sure, as I said, we've met with the California Independent System Operator, if they're the successful market operator, and Bonneville Power Administration up in the Northwest, if they were to fall or not to fall. But I think they do understand the value of the capacity component and the...
Absolutely.
Right. It looks like we have another question coming in through in terms of, do we need all 12 modules? So if I'm reading that right, to get to the 55, or do we have less modules deployed? Is that proper understanding of the question? So right now, what we've got it based on is that we've been looking at, we'll have a more definitive answer in how many we've got. So let me just give you a rough overview of how this works. So I mentioned earlier, and everybody's sort of asking that we have this balance of plant, we call it. This is all the concrete, rebar, the site development, all that, to house these reactors that are going to be built in the factory and hauled out to our site coming in. And so that is sort of the fundamental amount of money that has to be spent. We can't build common facilities for just 4 reactors, because the way the licensing is going to be coming through is based on 12 reactor building. We will have a schedule. We are working on that to see if we can do less than that. We've been looking at roughly, I can just give you this, please don't hold me to the exact concept, and I won't give you an exact number, but I'll give you a ballpark number, is that if we had 10 reactors instead of 12 reactors in the 12-unit facility balance of plant, that we're roughly at $58. And we're going to see what those numbers are as we're going through and working on that right now with the consultants to give you a better feel for that as we go through. I think the other concept is that we're working on in that same vein is that we would like to give you, as first movers, the term pioneers come up numerous times, a discount to the $55. Which is totally rational versus latecomers. In some ways, that cuts against subscription late into the process. But if we can find a way to have people that want to only come in if it's totally de-risked, there's no risk associated, maybe they should have to pay a higher premium than those that have taken the risk in the front end. So we're working on both of those aspects going through. If that answers the question, I let them re-up. See, do we have another open question, it looks like, or?
Not seeing any.
Yeah, I guess that was the same question. So let's see if I've got sort of covered everybody out there. I think the consultants, one thing that came up on the water, let me just go through on the water amounts. It's a significant reduction associated with the water in terms of wet cooling, dry cooling. There is the parasitic load. We do have at high humidity, high temperatures, a back pressure that comes on that that radiator cooling out there. But if you think about it in this, right now, one of the things we deal with in the electric market is very low cost solar power that is not dispatchable, right? So when the sun is shining, you've all heard, I'm sure, of the infamous duck curve concept out there. That is, when the sun comes up in the morning, the load falls off dramatically because this generation is coming on. We cannot turn it off or on. It is just like a loss of load that comes in, and that power gets very, very cheap, if you will, as it starts to come into the process out there. What happens though is in the afternoon and this is just early afternoon, is the angle depending on where the solar and how it's situated, the solar starts to fall off very, very rapidly on a ramp rate that falls off very quickly. And that's when power prices start to get very, very expensive again as they go up, as we're trying to follow it. With most thermal fossil fuel fired generators, they have to burn fuel and just spin to stay online. As we said, we can start to ramp ours down, and due to the nature of the nuclear reaction in terms of the uranium, and that our fuel, if you will, it's not the same concept of just spent steam moving off. It really doesn't change our fuel cycle cost very much at all. And so we can really move to that ramp rate and keep that in. And so we believe that there is a premium to be paid for that into the market to back that up. And you can look at that in the reserve rates that are right now in the ISO on your power right now. We see those costs going up. And I think with that, I don't know if we've got any other questions coming through. We're starting to get close to our time, but if there's no others, again, I thank everybody. And Mike, you can sort of close us down if you don't have any other questions.
There are no other questions, so it looks like we will just conclude. I guess that's the rest of the town hall. Thank you so much for participating.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Doug.
Thanks.